This is Rabbit from Pepper Productions.
Welcome back, my darlings. Missed me?
This game has gotten one of the loudest and scariest fandoms. Of all times, this was the scene that actually made me cry. So let's get on to why I used to hate this game.
Welcome back, my darlings. Missed me? Today, we're back with a simple but fun production for you all. I'm your host for today, Sakura. This isn't usually my kind of topic to touch on, but I am grateful to bring you a production on a game many of you have heard of. Care to explain to them, sweetie?
Yes, if you've been following, I am very into the Persona series. It seems like I am finally giving a look at the series entry that led to its mainstream popularity. The thing about P5 is that it's still having a major influence to this day to new games and other projects. Not to mention the development hell, the simple yet really deep narrative, the countless reactions, praises, riots, and anything else you can name. It's all happened with this game. This is not only going to be one of the longest, most ambitious productions yet, it just might also be the most fundamentally different one I've ever had to make.
What nicer way than to accompany us for it, then? This is Sakura.
And Rabbit.
And this is Under the Mask. So, Persona 5's development was quite a lengthy one, taking almost a decade from concept to final release. But why was this? Let's start from the beginning. So Persona 4 just released. Katsura Hoshino, the director of Persona 3 and 4, has just started brainstorming for ideas on the next title. His plan was a little bit different this time. He wanted to take 5 with a focus on gentleman thieves. For those of you who don't know, a gentleman thief is a character trope in fiction, referring to one born wealthy but is an expert at stealing. These kinds of characters are known to be taking from the rich while also maintaining their manners and fancy image. Oh, good taste, I must say. It seemed that Hoshino really wanted to push this idea, even going as far as to call it Persona the Third during its planning phase. During this time, there wasn't much going on other than just writing down some ideas. It was until 2009, however, since Persona 5 planned to be the most ambitious entry yet, they decided to make Catherine.
This was to test how life-size models would work, HD game development, and even test out their new in-house proprietary engine. Not everyone on the team was working on it though. For the rest, they just had to work with what they knew and get to the exact vision Hoshino asked for. Keep in mind that more than half of Atlus entirely had other projects during this time too. They were just hot off their heels with Persona 4, so they were working on projects like spin-offs and soon its re-release and a ton of other non-Persona titles.
See, sweetie? This is why you never rely on 1 or 2 people at your workspace. Anyways, active development didn't actually begin until 2011, right after Catherine eventually released. To be fair, this was easily a very good time for P Studio to experiment with whatever they had in mind.
And hey, Catherine turned out to be a favorite for many Atlus fans. Oh, that reminds me, I haven't even mentioned what ideas were actually thrown for P5. Despite the Persona series being known to be turn-based, it actually was planned to be a real-time action game. The likes of hack and slash, for example. This was somewhat scrapped, because in a sense you can still feel a sense of small action set pieces in its combat. On top of this, there was also the idea of adding in completely original layouts for dungeons. This was a welcomed addition, since basically every Persona game before 5 just consisted of randomly generated areas to explore. JRPGs and other games for a long time, even before Persona 4's release, have already been doing this, so it's perfect to give this a try. A lot of these dungeons, soon to be called palaces, took inspiration from different parts of the world. Heck, we even got back some long-abandoned mechanics. Persona 1 had a demon negotiation system where you talk to the shadows to make them part of your team. In 5, that's completely brought back. And fun fact, the little animation the Phantom Thieves make when talking to a demon was inspired from many action movies, with the characters pointing their guns at the enemy like they're in a crime scene. And for this last one, I cannot go without mentioning it. Persona 5 was originally meant to be set around the world, with characters going to different countries to stop these new antagonists and/or obstacles. This was a really cool idea, but due to the tsunami that happened around 2011, it was scrapped and replaced to be only set in Japan.
Yes. Dark times.
So with a few years of development behind them and P Studio being a little more confident with progress, we finally got our first ever teaser. the infamous ball and chain announcement. The reaction this got was odd, to say the least. On one hand, yes, we did get confirmed a new entry, but on the other, not only was Atlus just pumping out new Persona games on a yearly basis, this teaser had absolutely nothing to show. All it said was that it was releasing for winter of 2014 for the PS3. Little did we know that this was far from the truth. Back in December of 2014, in a Sony press conference in Tokyo Game Show, we did actually get our first official trailer with some stunning animation. However, the game got delayed, starting its release in just 2015. No month, no season, just the year. Let's look on the bright side, though. The game's at least coming to the PS4 now. It was actually the main reason it got delayed, according to Hoshino. This was easily the best time to have one, then. Can't wait till we get this in 2015. Okay. So, even though we did actually get our first gameplay trailer, which actually has a ton of differences to the final products, it was also said that it was further delayed to late 2016. This is 8 years in since they started conceptualizing the project and briefly mentioned it publicly. I couldn't find any reasoning for it, but I guess it's just to give that extra polish. Fortunately, the game did release eventually, but only in Japan. Persona 5 finally released on September 15th, 2016. It was a massive deal. There was a 20th anniversary collection for it, DLC, and a lot of fancy merchandise for it. So that leaves us with the question, what about the West? This game has come to North America eventually, so when was that? Thankfully, it was confirmed later on that Persona 5 will be coming to the West on February 14th, 2017.
Guess you could say Atlus wanted to steal our hearts. Huh, sweetie? Aw, cheer up from time to time.
But this is great. After almost a decade of waiting, we finally get to play Persona 5 in all its glory. We just have to wait a few more months and then we can play it. I am starting to believe that Atlus just hates us. Don't worry, the game did come out eventually. The reason why it was delayed this time was supposedly they wanted to add more English voice acting or something along those lines. Whatever the case was, and even though I've been very negative on the delays, I really do appreciate how Atlus took their time. I'd even go as far as to say it was worth it. Why don't we get to the story now? Sakura, I am passing you the baton now.
With pleasure. Our story takes hold on this fancy casino here. You play as this handsome one, named Joker, stealing what others claim to be a treasure. Ooh, quite fascinating so far. As you escape from the scene, you're caught from some guards and are taken into custody. While all hope was lost, a defendant under the name Sai Nijima takes care of the situation and tries to uncover your true motivation. Once you start to speak from your past, that's when the narrative truly begins. For a bit of background, you play as Ren Amamiya. He's been brought to Shibuya after getting into a confrontation between two other adults, causing Ren to be under probation for a year so he can be deemed as innocent. While you try to redeem yourself by staying out of shady business, you make some new friends, while also forming the Phantom Thieves, a group where you travel to a different world called the Metaverse to change the hearts of evil adults to confess for their crimes.
Yeah, that's kind of the gist of the main narrative. There's no real need for a true introduction or deep explanation as to how it works. At its core, Persona 5's story is, to be blunt, nothing special. It's just a typical younger generation rebelling against their elders kind of story. What makes it stand out, however, is the execution. Let's start with this whole metaverse concept. The way it works is whoever the person you're going after is the ruler of this world you visit. The world is also known as a palace. Palaces are, in simple terms, a recreation of how said ruler sees himself. Let's take Kamoshida for example, the first of these rulers you face. For context, Kamoshida is a very well-respected teacher in the school, but behind the scenes he's been accused of abusing his students and doing certain things I don't feel comfortable saying. You could say in a way that he's acting like the school is his castle. In the palace, this is only further shown but to a much more literal degree, with Kamoshida eventually being a king and showing instances of how he treats the same people you see on campus, all but in a much harsher way. This kind of symbolism and theming stays throughout each of the palaces. As mentioned, Kamoshida likes to see himself as a king. We also have Okumura, a CEO of a company who overworks his employees, utilizes robots that barely have a minute for a lunch break. Oh, and I haven't even mentioned mementos. You see, while we do get to explore areas centered around one person, that only happens because their grief and inner desires are just that powerful. Mementos plays as a palace, but for the public, letting you find more people with these distorted thoughts, but on a much smaller scale. I might make this story seem super hard to understand, but believe me, the game has no issue explaining how it works, and it's very well done. By the second to third palace, you really start to get a feel for the metaverse. which is quite funny because there is one particular palace that subverts your expectations. Alright, I'll go over it. Okay, so during this whole journey of taking down criminals, the Phantom Thieves start getting massive traction online, which soon leads to an anonymous group of so-called hackers named Mintjoy threatening to reveal their true identities to the public. A person called Alibaba is willing to help out the group if they change a person's heart, in this case being Futaba Sakura, a girl who's been traumatized because she thinks she killed her mother. You can see the kind of changes made compared to our previous rulers. For one, Futaba isn't exactly a bad person. Her desires aren't made because she wants to hurt people. She just wants to be mentally well and see the reality and who was the one behind her mom's death. Heck, this entire palace and arc Futaba went through feels very reminiscent of Persona 4. Futaba even goes inside her own palace and talks to the Shadow to realize the truth. I mean, come on, it's certainly better than just one big bad CEO number 42 in my opinion. But that's enough of the villains. How does one even become a Phantom Thief, you ask? Well, as you can see, they kind of need to rebel against whoever they personally oppose. Ryuji defends himself against Kamoshida, Yusuke stops listening to Madarame, Haru quits accepting her dad's orders, and so on. The entire idea of a Phantom Thief is to show them that you will fight for your own beliefs and morals. And by stealing a heart, you're removing the desires that this person has, making them feel useless without confessing for their crimes. Now, do keep in mind that that is a double-edged sword. I say this because after we defeat Okamura and take his heart, he gets killed by a certain someone. This makes the Okamura in the real world actually die as well. And trust me, this soon becomes a new point for the game. Up until the point that I've been talking about, your only priority was not getting in trouble and having the people you target confess. The Phantom Thieves by this point are basically celebrities to not only a national, but global scale. After Okamura's death, however, the backlash immediately begins after the group is framed for it. Okay, and side note, I just really want to say this, Atlus completely predicted cancel culture and just how destructive it really is. Think about it, voicing your opinion to the point that either A, it makes a person completely confess for their actions, or B, completely destroy their career and hard work forever. The amount of similarities Persona 5 has to our world just a few years later is scary. And yes, P5 of all games, I feel, is one of the main contributors to this kind of idea. Not to mention this whole meta-commentary of revolting against your elders considering they're part of a 1% of the population who are in complete power over you, and your friends are just cogs in a machine we call society that only exists to make us believe we can actually do good in life, while in reality we just have no choice but to listen and live tragic lives and suffer harsh consequences if we decide to revolt. Yes, Persona 5 did this, and is one of the main reasons I am legitimately scared of it. So after the Phantom Thieves get framed for it, it actually does get a lot more interesting. I won't try to go over everything, but to give you an idea, you basically team up with this guy named Koro Akechi to find the culprit behind Okamura's death. Turns out, he was it all along. So that was a nice twist. So now we just have to take him down, and our last target, Shido, a politician who wants to bring down the country. Well, after defeating him, you do the whole fighting a god thing, and society is helping you, and so on and so forth, and whatever. I have to be honest, and I'll say it once again, these parts of Persona are the least appealing to me. Alright, so what are my overall thoughts then? Well, this is a pretty good story. Great characters, simple yet very interesting world building, and lots of action. Ryuji is single-handedly my favorite of the cast. He's always very energetic, outgoing, and while he causes a bit of trouble for others, he just wants to do what's right. You meet him right as you applied for your new school, so once the teachers see you're hanging out with him, that's already a red flag for them. There's also Yusuke, a young and humble artist whose talent was used to give more clout for his teacher. Once you help him and get to see what Yusuke is all about, you can really see how passionate he is for his art, and always strives to create a piece with a very deep meaning. Sure, this cast isn't as exciting or as fun as Persona 4's, but what's here is really well done, and I'm genuinely surprised at how fun it was to just relive these moments again. The pacing can be all over the place though, and that's probably my biggest gripe with it. You see, unlike Persona 3 and 4, and heck, maybe the ones prior to those, at least they always had a very straight-to-the-point beginning. They give you enough context for what's going on, but they never drag a tutorial. Well, I hope you like a long and slow beginning, because P5 is guilty of that. I'm not kidding. It takes a good 20 to 30 hours to finally stop being told about new mechanics and things you can do. Now I know, Persona 5 mechanically is a lot more ambitious compared to what we've been used to. With the game wanting to do some in-depth world building and bringing in new mechanics like guns and demon negotiation, it makes sense to do this. My issue is that a lot of this stuff didn't need to take so long. You're constantly stopped to be told a new move you can do, hear the characters get all excited about how cool you looked, and proceed. This just makes it really hard to replay P5 when you already know all of the systems. And don't worry, this isn't just regarding the start of a playthrough. You also get pretty out-of-nowhere scenes. For example, after you save Futaba, you all decide to go to the beach to have some fun. That's fine. However, once you come back to school a few days after that, you all go to Hawaii. Why are we all heading to another beach scene right after one we just had? Correct me if I'm wrong, but this trip was never mentioned until right before you came back to class. So it all just happens out of nowhere. I guess I will admit that Kasumi appearing with you in Royal was kind of cute. Oh, and don't worry, I didn't forget about P5R. We'll get to that later. And I guess I should also mention the infamous scene most people hate. Ryuji and Morgana's argument. Now, look, I get it. Ryuji's quite a prick here, and Morgana has probably been annoying to the majority of the audience. Hence why I dislike him here. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't actually like this scene. For context, basically up until this point, the Phantom Thieves have been very popular with the media, so Ryuji's ego has skyrocketed and wants to steal more hearts. However, Morgana calls him and the team out on this, so he decides to take down Okamura, our target, by himself. And yeah, I can understand how this brings the main story to a halt, but it does bring a very interesting point on the character's motivation and just gives the team a little more development, especially with Morgana. He started off as introducing you to the metaverse and how it works, only to be shafted over time and even more with Futaba being the brains of the team. So in a weird way, it calls out a big issue with Morgana while developing him. So yeah, in all honesty, Persona 5's story really isn't all that bad. It's a bit simple in concept, yes, but the way that they execute a lot of its main characters, not to mention the middle portion of it, is really well written too. What better time than now to get into the gameplay? Sakura, mind explaining the gameplay for me?
Oh, alright. Persona 5 plays pretty similarly to its contemporaries. You control as the lead, sprint around the different locations, purchase items, battle demons, and a couple of other activities. And if you've been familiar with this series, there's still the social links, now titled as Confidants. Although, there certainly are a handful of improvements and additions to this system. Let's start with the presentation. As you can see, a numerous amount of the design elements have been greatly improved, such as the on-screen menu, cues for doing damage, and a lot of other things throughout your playthrough. In my personal opinion, this is rather fascinating. And as you can see, we did take a bit of inspiration from the game. Not only do these cute animations communicate well with the user, it also makes the game heavily stand out. Just look at how gorgeous they made the all-out attacks. Aside from that, we get to negotiate with demons, as Rabbit clarified earlier. Where this game really stands out from the rest is its theming. Kiss goodbye to those simple dungeons and say hello to uniquely designed ones. This doesn't mention the fact that there's an emphasis on stealth here, needing to conceal from enemies by using the environment and this meter, clarifying how many are aware of your presence. If you decide to be reckless and fill that gauge, you immediately get kicked out from the palace. It seems like this is everything. Anything you want to add, sweetie?
Well, there are some things. On top of visiting these places and taking down the rulers, you do also get to visit mementos. Think of this as just a simpler version of Tartarus from Persona 3. Randomly generated floors for you to explore, get items, and fight enemies from the previous dungeons. This works really well as just a way to grind if you finished a palace and have a lot of free time in your hands. Sometimes the game will even request you to change the heart of someone through mementos. In general, there's not much that I can say that's wrong with the gameplay. Sure, there are some issues with how much you can truly explore the dungeons and how limited your time can be, but thankfully a lot of true criticisms were fixed in its re-release, Persona 5 Royal, which, I guess, is a good time now to talk about it. For a bit of context, with Persona 5 being Persona 5, it would only be a matter of time until we get a definitive edition, and so we did. Teased around early 2019, fully revealed in E3 of the same year, and finally released in these respective dates. Here's just a simple idea of what they added. New menu screen, new palace, new locations, new confidants, more character development, new weapons, new costumes, and more DLC to empty any leftover sayings you have. So let's go over these things in more detail. One of the biggest additions to the combat system is the new Showtime attack. These are essentially just one massive and stylish blow between characters, like Morgana and Anne fighting together as Morgana just pulls out a cartoon bomb and Yusuke and Ryuji having lunch until an enemy disturbs them, making them team against it. These are super nice to look at and do incredible damage if you use them on the right enemies. They mostly come at random though, meaning you can't really plan these out, though they appear pretty often as you explore the palaces. Another big addition is Jose, a being who travels around mementos for flowers. They don't really establish who he is or why he needs so many flowers, but you can trade them in with him to get boosts and items to use in the metaverse. Last but not least, in main gameplay, there's also will seeds. These are, in simple terms, just a nice collectible you can find hidden in all palaces. Getting all 3 per palace will give you some really powerful accessories, so it's nice having these. Oh, and there's also the Thieves' Den. This is completely outside the game, but really cool regardless. As you progress and do certain challenges, you'll get what are called P medals. You can buy things like statues to place in the area, music, concept art, and cutscenes of the game. I really am a big fan of this kind of stuff, and it's super nice to see it in Royal. It just makes the game feel that more definitive and that the team really enjoyed developing it. But, alright, I know what you're all waiting for. Let's get into the palace and the confidants. Persona 5 Royal added 2 new characters, Maruki and Kasumi. Kasumi is a new classmate you stumble across, just a very cheerful and nice person who does gymnastics. As for Maruki, he's a bit of a therapist or a psychiatrist who asks for your help to do a little personal project of his. However, once you max out both of their confidants before a specific date, that's when you unlock the new semester. The story for it is pretty simple. It is now the new year and you defeated Shido. However, things aren't looking the same as you remember. Morgana is apparently now a human, and Futaba's mom is alive? Wasn't it established that, you know? So this makes Ren, or you, the protagonist, go to your friends and see what's going on. Apparently all of them have gone back to their old selves. What I mean is, any character development you've done through the confidants, gone. Just pretend like it never happened, because that's exactly what's going on. And also the fact that Morgana is still a human. And the fact that Akechi is still alive. What? Akechi's back? The last time this happened, yeah, things are really weird now. It's at this point that you, Akechi, and soon Kasumi, who joins you, try to find out what happened. To keep a long story short, I'll just say this. Remember Maruki? Yeah, since you helped him with this project he was doing, it all came to fruition. That is, creating a reality where everyone is happy and all of their problems are erased. This only becomes more apparent when we find out a dark truth about Kasumi, or should I say, Sumire. You see, Sumire was just a typical shy girl, but after a horrible accident and her sister named Kasumi sacrificed herself to save her, she was traumatized, and in order to cope with this and forget that this ever happened, she became Kasumi. She spoke like her, dressed like her, heck, she used the same hairstyle as her. This was one of the main reasons Maruki made this world and was very understanding of Sumire. Akechi, however, was completely against it. He saw this as a method of brainwashing and messing with reality as if he was an almighty god. Even if that meant he could actually live, it just becomes this very complicated and philosophical debate of hiding your issues for happiness, or dealing with it and always having that pain present in your head. Like, holy
Sweetie!
Sorry, I got a bit excited.
You're lucky we have editors.
As I was saying, Persona has always been a very solid series with its writing, but this is a whole new level. The characters here genuinely feel amazing. They're already established, so you know how they behave. So at this point they truly play around with this just very dark and heartbreaking reality. Sumire's whole idea of wanting to be the person who sacrificed herself for her sister is incredibly disturbing, but weirdly ironic. Up until now we got to learn so much about what we thought was Kasumi, a very cheerful girl who just wants to be good at what she is. But now that all of that is completely thrown out the window, but in a way I could never imagine. Of all times, this was the scene that actually made me cry. It was that emotionally heavy for me, and I wish I were lying to you. Well, after all that, you and the now returned to normal Phantom Thieves decide to take down Maruki once and for all before this new reality becomes permanent to the world. However, as the thieves explore this new palace, it's also here that you actually see some true development on Maruki as well. Wait, more character development? Like, actual motivations, unlike Big Bad CEO number 42? That's it. Persona 5 Royal, best game of all time. 10 out of 10 will recommend. Pack it up, boys, we're out. But yes, there's a real reason behind Maruki's motives. You see, Maruki has been researching mementos and cognitive science for a long time now. He did this because he wanted to help his girlfriend after being severely traumatized to the point she can't even talk. However, in helping it would mean that she would never remember him, ultimately sacrificing her memories of them together just for her happiness. Maruki just slowly falls into this idea of continuing his research to keep people happy. However, that's what he thinks. To Akechi and soon the Phantom Thieves, this is a manipulation of their lives. Even if he has good intentions, it does not deny how dystopian and horrifying it really sounds. Just, wow. Maruki is without a doubt one of the best, no, the best antagonist in the series. This doesn't even mention the final battle you have with him. Sure, it's not much of a true boss fight, more so just a very fun action set piece at the end, but come on. How can you not love this? But anyway, once you defeat Maruki, everything's back to normal. You have one last trip with your friends and... Maruki? Huh, small world, isn't it? Well, yeah, you just hang out with your friends one last time before heading home. And that was Persona 5 Royal, and 5 to an extent. If 5 was a really well-baked cookie, Royal is one of the most delicious cookies I've ever eaten. There's so much to love here. I might even say the new semester brings some of the best the franchise has ever come up with. Sure, the whole idea of regressing the characters back to themselves when you meet them is a cheap conflict, but you can't deny how excellently written the inclusion of Maruki and Sumire is. They absolutely steal the show and left me so curious as to what happens next. Whatever the case is, all I can say is Persona 5 Royal easily reminded me of what made this series so good. So let's get on to why I used to hate this game. Persona 5 released on the dates you see here, and how did it do? Yeah, saying this game performed really well would be a massive understatement. It exploded all the way to the mainstream popularity, selling well over 3 million copies in total and currently being Atlus' best-selling game of all time. And as for fans and critics, they just ate this up. So what's wrong with this? Shouldn't I be proud that this game did so great? Well, while Persona 5 did do really well, it also sparked a major debate. Is Persona 5 being milked too much? This is going to be a bit of my death wish.
Which is why I brought in someone special to be here. Why don't we bring our special guest here? Care to explain?
At times, Atlus can feel like the dad that went to the store for milk, only he actually came back with it and then proceeded to go buy a new carton every single day for the next 5 years, but you only ever drink 1 or 2 glasses a week. Okay, they're not that bad, but still, for the last decade, Atlus has been experts at milking the Persona franchise, and frankly, I can't fully blame them. Not only is it just good business sense to find different ways to double down on your successes, but seeing as they almost went out of business around the time this started, I can imagine there's some level of financial PTSD they're trying to avoid triggering. Upon release, Persona 5 was beloved by basically everyone who played it, all while being able to grab the attention of people who had never even heard of Atlus, let alone played one of their games. This game slingshotted the company to stardom and made them a name in the somewhat mainstream gaming zeitgeist. Again, from a business perspective, it makes complete sense to cash in on the success, as it would not only bring in more money, but it would keep the company in the mouths of this new audience they found themselves with. Cameos, collabs, and anime adaptations, spin-offs, sequels, everything to keep people thinking about that nifty RPG from 6 years ago. However, it's also resulted in a new problem: overexposure. Prior to the game's release, Atlus was becoming infamous within its own fanbase for how much they milked the prior number game in the series, P4. A fighting game, a dancing game, an enhanced re-release, and not 1, but 2 anime adaptations that were barely any different from each other. While it was all well received, except for that second anime, people were growing tired of Persona 4 and were desperate for what came next. Now, years after that first thirst was quenched, the desperation has been renewed for many diehard fans, and arguably is worse than it was the first time. And sadly, there looks to be no end in sight beyond mere speculation. As time has gone on, Joker and the Phantom Thieves appearing in games went from producing cheers to groans. They were everywhere, and the novelty of them was worn off. What draw they had was greatly diminished and has resulted in indifference towards new ventures. The upcoming release of Persona 5 Tactica, the newest spin-off in this sub-franchise, has seen little excitement online, especially when compared to the remake of Persona 3 that was announced at the same time. This isn't to say the game looks bad or will be bad, but rather it's an observation of how the Atlus fanbase is growing tired of the constant abuse of the IP. Personally, one of my biggest problems with this milking has been how Atlus has failed to use the success of this game in a way to grow the entire company's portfolio. While they have tried to use the success of P5 to bolster and draw attention to other releases, these attempts are nothing but one-trick ponies. They put the main cast of that game in the Phantom Thieves outfit, because somehow that's supposed to be enough to get people interested in the game. It's gotten to the point where it feels like the equivalent of Atlus jangling keys in our face. While I don't have hard numbers, I feel confident in saying these crossovers just don't work. The only game to have gained massive success relative to the size of its series is Shin Megami Tensei 5, and that game didn't have any crossover with P5. Rather, that game was promoted on its own merits and the success of its own series, and ended up being the best-selling game in that franchise. Not to mention, its marketing campaign was arguably the second biggest Atlus had done since 2017. But that's just one game out of all of the ones Atlus has made in the last 6 years. It makes things like putting Ringo in Joker's outfit feel like a half-assed replacement for genuine push. If they wanted to use the success of P5 to promote their other games, it feels like they don't actually understand what they're doing. Instead, they just slap P5 on it and tell people about it, thinking that's enough. While I'm sure the next mainline entry in the Persona series is coming in the next few years, I don't know if the Persona 5 brand can keep fans preoccupied that much longer. While Persona 5 Strikers and Persona 5 Royal are well liked, the P5 anime has been criticized for its poor adaptation and stupidly drawn out length. Persona 5 Dancing in Starlight is generally agreed to be the worst Atlus game of the last decade. Persona 5 The Phantom X has more people talking about a brand new MILF character as opposed to anything else with it. And Persona 5 Tactica, again, has little to no discussion beyond a basic, oh yeah, it looks cool, in the lead up to its release. It feels like the only thing that could actually get people excited about a new Persona 5 project would be a new arena game, but the likelihood of one of those happening seems to diminish with every passing day. The thing is, it still works. While a bunch of Western fans might be getting tired, these collabs keep happening. Anything labeled P5 still sells. We always got to remember that the complaints online, even if they seem to be the majority, don't always represent what's actually going on within the fandom. Diehard Atlus fans could be growing tired of Persona 5, but so long as the mainstream isn't, it's going to keep happening. The best we can really do is make our voices heard while we grin and bear it. P6 will be here someday. We're just gonna have to deal with Atlus constantly shoving Joker in our faces, acting like it's something to be excited about until then.
Wait, is that who I think it is? Since when did you bring him on?
Trust me, sweetie. A few connections can go a long way.
Uh-huh. Well, yeah, if I had to give my own thoughts on this, well, yes, Atlus is going a bit overboard with the amount of spin-offs with P5. It is making Atlus become very experimental with genres we've never seen before. Who would have thought the same people who make JRPGs made a hack-and-slash fighting game, dance rhythm game, a mobile game that looks just as good as the main ones, and an SRPG? It's a great way to see them try out new ideas and how they can fit in with the P5 aesthetic and mechanics, for better and for worse. Look, I don't tend to talk about fan reception and memes, but you cannot make a P5 production without mentioning it. This game has gotten one of the loudest and scariest fandoms. Combine that with how earlier we mentioned he got into a smash, that alone made his popularity skyrocket to the moon. Remember the whole break-free Persona movement? For those who don't remember, back in early 2020, many fans absolutely screamed at Atlus to post the games. They sent videos, bombarded their social media platforms, and outright harassed the developers for it. Like, guys, look, I love Persona 5, and I was on the side that wanted the games ported, but it's stuff like this that disgusts me to see, and it's for the same reason that many simply just hate the game and its community. I would never condone anyone doing this, not even on my most wished games. It's incredibly sad how this game has built its reputation so well, only to be demolished by the people who are so desperate to want to play it. But hey, I guess that's just simply what happens when you have a large and diverse enough fandom. Whatever the case is, it's no denying that Persona 5 truly had a massive impact on our lives, and it will always be known for it. You know, of all the games in the Persona series, Persona 5 truly is a very different beast. Not only is it the most ambitious, the most unique, the most stylish in this series yet, but it's also the most controversial, the most milked, and the most despised currently. Honestly, that's what made this game so much fun to me. Getting to experience this wild roller coaster of emotions was a treat. Getting to know these simple but great characters, the masterpiece that was Royal, and the chaos that happened because of the people who played it, it will all always have such a special place in my heart. Persona 5 might not be for everyone. Maybe you miss the good old days of 3 and 4. Heck, maybe you miss the first 2 Persona games. But as much as we can love and hate this title, let's just hope Atlus learns from all this and makes Persona 6 another great entry to the series. And not have Big Bad CEO number 43. This is Rabbit!
And Sakura.
From Pepper Productions.
No